Um, Firstly, I'm very honored to be asked to speak over here, considering I don't have too much of an experience within the travel fraternity. It's just been about 7 to 8 years since I've been doing this, organizing travel for others. Uh, I have spent most of my lifetime traveling for wildlife, and that's what my family enjoys doing as well. And I have traveled a fair bit for wildlife and wildlife photography. Initially when I had put this together, it was largely, as a training program for my team, people in my organization, and also, it is largely going to be focused at basics of, planning journeys, whereas wildlife is concerned. And I see a lot of very senior people here, also a lot of travel partners from overseas. So please bear that in mind when I take you through this presentation, that I'll be covering some of the basics, which a lot of you may already be doing so. But just keep that in the back of your mind. Now, as a traveler, when I moved, I worked for about a year with Rare India, marketing and promoting wildlife lodges, and I've spent about 6 years as part of Creative Travel, promoting wildlife experiences. And in this short period, I've had the opportunity to use these platforms to see how wildlife is being promoted promoted by travel companies in India, also travel companies overseas. And there are many points that came about which I didn't notice as a traveler. So, just to begin with, I want to talk about some of these broader points, and this is largely targeted at those who travel overseas to promote. And also, these are some points that I feel are also the challenges that India needs to overcome when talking about wildlife travel to the destination. Uh, Sorry. Now, the biggest, well, what hit me the most is, when I joined the travel fraternity, I realized how little is known about India as a wildlife destination. And this is true not only, for travel companies overseas, or travelers from overseas, those of you who are, talking directly to the end consumers, and also awareness within India, people of India within the travel fraternity. And so this is definitely something that we need to develop, is, we need to learn more about India as a wildlife destination. Also, what I realize is a lot of times, we are underselling what we have. I look at programs that are being sold for Borneo, for Patagonia, for North America, for countries in Europe, for Russia, and quite often I find ourselves to be the least expensive programs, and we are always working at creating smaller slices of the pie rather than growing the pie. So that is something that we need to work upon, from an image perspective for wildlife travel to India. Uh, Now, another point, and which is something that is changing quite rapidly, is wildlife used to be just clubbed with adventure, and there are not many people who have specialists on their team to help you develop, especially because it is a very specialized area of travel. There's a lot of information that is required in our itineraries, programs, etc. And also because there is lack of awareness about what India has overall. So these are just broader points. I just want to highlight them. Owners of companies and managing director level people uh, on this call. So from just a marketing sales perspective, I think we need to come together and put up a uniform front for wildlife travel to India, because there is a huge potential here. And unfortunately, we are not making the best of it. So that is something, I mean, this is a much larger discussion and not the main discussion for today. Also, I realize that there are large areas of India where there is literally no development from, the forest, or, how the experience develops in that particular area. And I largely would think that is because of, it's a demand and supply problem. We are not promoting those regions or experiences. So there's less investment going into those regions. And that is something that we might want to look at. Uh, these are just some ideas that I would like to just throw out there. Like I said, this is not the discussion for today, but this is something to be kept at the back of your mind when you are talking to the end consumer, or to our foreign part, or to your foreign partners overseas. Also, what I found lacking is there is no synergy between, our forest department, travel companies, and yes, that is changing and it is evolving as we go along. And India has always promoted itself as a cultural destination, and for the forest department, they are focused at conservation, and very few regions are now looking at it as a regular source of income. As you can make great amount of money from it also incentivizes locals, if money is going into that area to conserve. So because of those reasons, that is changing, but I still see there's not too much of a harmony when it comes to tourism and authorities that are managing these wildlife parks. So that is something that we can look at for future discussions. But now, I want to get down to what I feel are the main challenges in how we plan. And this I'm talking about at a planning stage. I'm talking about at a file handler's space. And this is what I felt coming into the industry. And it's not just in my company, my department, or XYZ company. It's generic all across. Yes, there are companies that are specialized wildlife companies, and that a large chunk of their business comes from wildlife travel. I am not talking about them because they automatically go deeper into the subject. So typical flow of how planning happens today in my mind, when I look at a DMC and how they operate, not a specialized wildlife. A query comes in, and quite often, we are restricted by time. We need to revert back within 24 hours. We have a itinerary that we feel might fit the purpose of the query. We modify it a little bit, tweak it to personalize, and we just chuck it forward. Now, I want to ask a question, and this is something you don't need to answer. Just think about it. How many of us actually take a look at that itinerary? I see itineraries and write-ups being passed down, copy pasted beyond X number of years. I still look up itineraries and I find Siberian crane mentioned in Bharatpur description. Now, why is that concerning? And this is something that I would like some of you to answer towards, and I'll give you an answer to this later on, is please think about how long back was it that the last Siberian crane was seen in Bharatpur. Uh, it is still present in our itineraries, and we are forwarding that information to our partners overseas. And this is just one example. We need to really look at some of the itineraries that we chuck out there, because a lot of the times our partners overseas are dependent on the information that we provide, and they would just copy paste it and put it on their websites. So just by browsing through X number of websites of people sending people to India, you realize how common this is. you know and and I think a large part of the travel fraternity, those who are building these itineraries, still don't realize that this is a big problem, but it is. um, we are still promoting the same iconic destinations over and over again. I think there must be 10, 15, 20 parks that we've been pushing out there, and we are just tweaking the same itineraries, giving it a different spin based on the information that we receive from as a query, and we are just throwing it back there. Most of these programs revolve around the tiger. And I did mention about lack of awareness, and I think this is something that initially when uh, we started promoting tiger as an iconic species, the umbrella under which everything else will be protected. We didn't care to develop and learn about the other species. We just kept talking about the tiger. And this is a huge problem today within the travel fraternity, that it's just tiger, 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 when there are so many beautiful species that we can be talking about. A large number of our experiences that we throw out there or that we are showcasing is focused on back-to-back jeep safaris. This is again something that is concerning. And lastly, I think very little goes into a decision on the lodges. It is still largely budget based, and where you get the best deal, which will fit the guest profile the best, just in terms of the budget, because there's very little questions that go back and forth in learning about our guests who's actually traveling. And quite often that is because there are multiple people in between our guests and ourselves. We are going through a travel company who may be selling through an agent, and then so on and so forth. So there's a lot that we don't understand about the person who's actually going to be visiting India. Now, the questions that we need to ask ourselves, and this is this slide is the key to how you can plan a more immersive experience when selling, specifically wildlife, but the same flow can go into all kinds of travel that we are thinking about. First and foremost, those who are in the travel business need to understand, if you want to create unique immersive itineraries, you need to learn about wildlife. I do not believe that somebody who does not know about wildlife can be just copy pasting somebody else's work, because you'll always end up with problems. You need to understand what is there when you interact with guests, when you travel for sales overseas, when you're talking to your travel partners. You are the ones who needs to educate them. It shouldn't be that they know more from other sources, etc., and they come to you and you just churn out an itinerary and throw it at them. You need to understand and you need to guide them. That's why we call them partners. We are not just a vendor. We are here to support them and help grow the destination in itself. We need to understand that diversity, without which you'll just be talking about tigers, elephants, rhinos, and that's about it. We need to understand about the network that we have. Like I mentioned, I find it a huge problem. Today we talk about Ranthambore being overcrowded, or Bandhavgarh, or Corbett, because these are the 10 parks that are being pushed. And again, I'm generalizing. Please don't take it the other way around. There are a lot of people who are there on this call. I'm not mentioning any names. I know who do a fantastic job of it. But this is something that we need to constantly keep asking ourselves. If we want to keep evolving the wildlife experience in India, how well do we know our network? How well do we understand, what are the parks in India? How can they be promoted? What are the regions? So on and so forth. And the big problem is, are we asking the right questions? Like I said, a lot of us don't even know the end consumer, because there are many channels in between. And again, for smaller companies that have a more direct relationship with their customer, this may or may not be the case. But in a lot of, even in our company such as ours, where we feel that, we are personalizing and other things, quite often a file handler in companies has to handle about 5 to 10 queries a day. And when you're doing that, you don't have time to ask these questions. But as soon as a query comes in, when the acknowledgement goes out, you need to ask the right questions, so that in those 5-10 questions, you know what the guest wants and how you can recommend this, what you need to recommend. Also, what I find lacking when I talk about awareness is, what are the options out there when we talk about wildlife travel? Is it just jeep safaris? Is it walking safaris? Is it boat safaris? Just in what Verghese had mentioned in Periyar, there were 10 different types of experiences that one can mention, one can promote. And we need to learn more about it. I see a lot of people going on FAMs and educationals, where they go to a particular park and they're just seeing endless number of hotels, rather than understanding the wildlife, understanding the experience, how one can differentiate. and not much thought is given to that. And that is something of a concern. You need to keep developing. How conscious are we about, the sustainability quotient? Are we even considering this when we are recommending an itinerary or a program? Is this there at the back of our mind or not? And like I said, these are questions you need to ask yourself. You don't need to answer to me or to anybody else. You need to be responsible towards sustainability. These questions are there for your own conscience if you want to improve in how you churn out the itineraries. The same goes for our lodge, the decision making for our lodges. How are you deciding which lodge to send your guests to? Are you regularly seeing what are the new things that are coming up, which are the new lodges which are coming up? How responsible or sustainable are they? Are you measuring that? Or is there a way, or are you partners with somebody who can help you measure that? So those are the kind of questions you need to ask yourself. Another huge problem with our industry is, when I look at the itinerary, is, I don't know how people decide how much time is ideal for a destination. So this is definitely a huge problem that I'm going to talk about a little later. uh, and lastly, I think not enough importance is given to naturalists. You know, I mean, I don't see that many recommendations of traveling naturalists going out in general. And when I say in general, I mean, you have a specialist guide for a city tour. Why aren't you recommending a specialist guide for the forest? Because quite often we leave it for the forest department guide, who, well, the forest department has a guide service. You need to understand, it is important for them to give uh, uh, to give jobs to the local people, because if money is going into local hands, then they value wildlife and the forest around them. Otherwise, wildlife is a pain, because they have to live next to wildlife day in and day out. Their children have to run the risk of walking to school and encountering a tiger or a leopard on foot. So they always have the risk of wild animals coming in and eating up their crop. So unless they are making money from it, they don't really care about conservation. Yes, in general, we are all, well-meaning human beings, but as long as it doesn't hurt us. And for those who are living next to the park, if it hurts them, they're not going to protect it. So that is why the forest department comes up with these jobs, and it is compulsory to take that forest guide. Some of the guides are excellent, I'm not denying that, but at the end of the day, you need to understand, especially for inbound travel, there is an element of communication. There is a element of, when you take a traveling naturalist, or in certain areas they do have wonderful lodge naturalists. uh, you have people who, these naturalists are very well educated, their communication skills are excellent, they have even traveled to other parts of the world for wildlife travel. So when they are going with your guests, they can correlate. You look at an adjutant stock in India and you can compare it to a marabou stock in Africa. But you cannot have that discussion if you've never been outside Kanha, or you've never been outside wherever. So that is the big problem, and that is something you need to consider, especially for the inbound market. Uh, so I'm going to touch upon some of these points a little bit more. A lot of us don't realize how much wildlife exists in India. India is, well, it's a large chunk of land, but when you're looking at the global space, it is still a very small area. So a lot of people don't realize that about 10%, close to 10% of the world's wildlife species reside in our part of the world. But are we really, I mean, are we aware about it? Do we talk about it when we are talking to our partners? So I just want to throw in some, facts out there which will make you realize how much we have. There are 15 species of wildcats that you find in India. Globally, there are, I think, 38 species. It's a debate which goes on whether 38 or 40 or 36. But no matter how you look at it, we have the highest diversity of wildcat species in the world in a single country. The entire continent of Africa, just from a perspectives point of view, has only 10 species of wildcats. About 12% of the world's bird species are in India. And there are parks in India where you have 50% of India's bird diversity in one park. So we need to learn about these. We need to talk about these, because without which you will not, if you yourself do not appreciate what we have, there is no way that you are going to convince somebody else that you can provide a fantastic experience, wildlife experience in India. We are in a country where you're still discovering new species and subspecies of amphibians, reptiles, and the likes. 50% of the bear species of the world are in India. We must value what we have. you know Literally any type of canid species you can think of in any part of the world, we have it here. We have wolves, we have jackals, we have fox species. So and they're very different from what you find in Africa or other parts of the world. So why should somebody who travels to other part of the world to photograph wolves not want to come here? To photograph wild dogs, not want to come here? To not want to photograph our whistling dogs? Similarly, there are entomology programs which happen all over the world. We have close to 1,500 species of butterflies. We have, amazing amount of diversity. And also we have what I like to call megafauna. These are largely large species which can weigh up to 1,000 kilos or more. Species like the rhino, the elephant, the gaur, the wild water buffalo. And yes, when we go talking about it, we need to highlight these things. You know, Now, the reason why we have this diversity is because we have different types of landscape that you have, anywhere in the world. We have something similar. Uh, as I mentioned before, India is a country which is about 3.2 million square kilometers. So planning has to be done accordingly. 91% of this is land, rest is water. Uh, Land area, it comprises of about 2.4% of the land area. We have 7,500 kilometers of coastline. But ask yourself, how much of this have you explored? How much of this are you promoting? Are we promoting marine wildlife in India? Are we promoting diving expeditions in India? I do not think we are doing that great a job of it. So these are various elements that we need to start talking about, because it all exists over here, whether it is dugongs, whether it's different type of turtle species, whether it's different types of whales or sharks, uh, no matter what it is, the world today is all about marketing it. If we don't speak about it, nobody will know about it. So this is something we need to talk about. We have 1,382 islands, but we are sending people to Maldives. So this is something to consider. When you're talking about experiences, you need to continue to highlight these figures to understand what this means and how much we have to promote. Uh, Now, I had mentioned that we only talk about 10, 15, 20 parks. There are, about 1,000 plus protected areas in India. How much do you think gets interest from the travel fraternity? How these are divided up? Do we even understand the difference between national parks, wildlife parks, conservation reserves? What is mentioned on this map, what is visible on this map is just our tiger reserves, which is 50% of the national parks, which is nothing compared to the 1,000 plus protected areas. There are 500 odd, wildlife sanctuaries, conservation reserves, community reserves. And do you know the best part? The difference in each of these protected areas has nothing to do with the wildlife that is found there. Uh, it is on the rules with regards to how humans interact in that area. In national parks, no other activity is allowed. In wildlife sanctuary, there are some activities such as collection of wood, etc., which is allowed. So it has nothing to do with the wildlife diversity that you have. So this is something to consider. How much do we have? In the initial slide, I spoke about demand and supply. You know, we need to spread out the tourism. You know, why should every person coming to India go to Ranthambore? Obviously, it will turn out to be an experience which not many appreciate. The kind of crowding that you have over there. Yes, the tigers over there are quite used to human presence, so they don't shy away. So you have better sightings. But animals get used to in all parks. You know, today you see far greater sightings of tigers in Satpura than you ever have before. So those are things to keep in mind. You know, these are just some stats I'm throwing out there to make you understand the importance of understanding what we have. Uh, you know, only and 1,000+ parks, but only about 5% of India's land area is protected area. You know, so this is something to consider. Now I understand, you know, when we are talking about understanding your guests, you must be doing this. So I'm not going to spend much time on this particular slide. But the idea is you need to understand what the guest enjoys in order to make it a nice, you know, in order to recommend a nice itinerary which will be worth their while. Why shunt them through parks that they may or may not be interested in? Are these guys interested in art? You know, do you want to offer a nice tribal art interaction in the middle of your wildlife safari? That might add value to your guests. So these are some things to consider, and you will never know that about your guests unless you ask questions like, you know, what do you enjoy traveling for? Are you, you know, if they're traveling with their, so most likely if they're traveling with friends, or they all have something in common. They have a common interest area like photography, art. If they're traveling with family, they may still have that, but at the same time different members of the family may have different interests, so you need to bring those elements into your itinerary as well. So firstly, you need to know what they enjoy. Now a lot of the guests may not know what they enjoy, but you need to ask them questions about what they enjoyed in their last holiday, be it in India or elsewhere. For that, you need to understand what is a wildlife experience like overseas. So the idea is we educate ourselves about many things. You need to start educating yourself about experiences elsewhere. That's when you're going to grow your own experience and within India. So you need to understand what are the experiences that happen in Africa if that's where your guests are coming from, and if that is the benchmark that your guest has for a wildlife, you know, journey. So you need to have that benchmark in mind and then plan their itinerary accordingly. So it is very important for you to go through a process where you have a sort of a questionnaire and you get to know about the guest. And this, I mean, since we have, you know, travel partners from overseas on this, I would think you yourself should have these questionnaires so that you pass on this information. You know, we pass on information about the dietary requirements, etc., but this is just as important. So unless you know India very well yourself, you need to pass on this information so a proper itinerary can be put together for the guests. Now, how much time is spent per destination? This is something that I would like to spend a bit of time on, and that is largely because I see this itinerary very often on many platforms, and you know, I'm always questioning myself as to, you know, why would somebody put this up? Uh, and some of the questions that, you know, that come up is, would I go with my family on this journey? You know, try and put yourself in the person's shoes. And firstly, you need to travel to these destinations to understand before recommending it. You know, don't just go by what you've heard from other people, or if an itinerary already exists. In your free time, in the time that you have now when there is very little travel, try and learn, try and see the ground realities, try and see if on ground you do this itinerary, uh, you know, how tiring is it going to get? My wife would kill me if I take her on an itinerary like this, you know. Also ask yourself, you know, questions like, you know, why am I offering this? Is there something new that somebody will be able to see? The idea is you need to understand the purpose of travel. The purpose of travel is not to, you know, tick box, you know, check all the boxes that you've been to this park, this park, this park. The idea is you need It needs to be a wildlife journey. They're interested in wildlife, and they're not interested in, just seeing 10 parks in the country, 4 parks in this case. So this is something that is very important. You are spending just about a day in the park. Is that enough? For that, you need to know the park well. You need to understand how much time it takes to explore a park. A lot of people think, okay, Bandhavgarh has the highest density of tigers in India. That's not true. Please read up about this, because yes, the tigers over you have great sightings because the animals are getting used to the tourists, but it does not mean it has the highest density. So things like that, a lot of people are sending guests there because of that reason alone. So you need to understand those kind of things. You don't really need 4 parks in a particular program of 12 to 13. You may want to add, a night in Delhi or Mumbai, wherever, whatever your exit point may be. This is not a very practical itinerary. It's a great itinerary if you're going on an educational trip, but our guests are not on an educational trip. They're here on a holiday, a vacation. They need chill time to just relax, unwind, and also to explore the destination better. So my recommendation is spend at least 3 nights in a park. This is something that I tell my team all the time. 2 nights is just not enough in any park, no matter where it is. No matter, even if you're doing a cultural itinerary and you need to push in 1 park or 2 parks, you might as well not give that, because if you've traveled to India, you'll realize you spend half a day commuting from the closest airport, because there is no domestic airport near any park. You need to drive 3 to 4 hours to any destination. So it takes up about half a day to get there. It takes up half a day to move to the next destination, and you're practically left with 1 full day in the park. So you need to understand that you need to give them at least 3 nights. I would even go further and say give them 4 nights. In about 12 days, if you just include 2 parks in this itinerary, I think you'll do a fantastic job. Uh, and the main reason for why I would say this is a better itinerary is, you're spending more time in a park. How much can you explore in 2 safaris if you have 1 day? Give yourself at least 4 days if you want to give them a fighting chance of seeing a tiger. Your explorations, the more time you have, the better results you'll get. You can reduce the number of safaris, because quite often when you're doing these 2 night safaris, you are there in a jeep all the time, because you spend half a day in a Innova or whatever mode of travel that you're using to transfer from to a destination. You are spending 3-4 hours in the morning, 3-4 hours in the afternoon doing back-to-back safaris, because you only have that much time to explore. If you have more time, you can take out 1 safari to give some leisure time, and that time can be used even for cultural immersions. People would love to understand and learn about the tribes that lived inside the forest, to learn about people want to give back to society. They can do a lot of activities in the villages. So those are the kind of things that you need to consider. The less time you spend on the road, the more time you have on the park. That is the philosophy that you need to just, it should be part of your system. There is no way that, even when I travel, domestically, if I do a weekend trip, my weekend trip is always 3 nights. 2 nights is just not enough, because I'll be driving for half a day, I'll be driving half a day back, and there's just not enough time for me to explore the park. Also, another thing we need to consider is that I know people are tiger centric, and I know that that's going to be your bread and butter, but that cannot just be it. You need to include parks such as Satpura in this case, but there are many examples. You have Periyar, you have Panna, and which can be built into many itineraries where you have multiple ways of exploring. Even for parks like Kanha, you need to consider going and exploring Fen Wildlife Sanctuary, which is only 2 hours away. So if you have more times on your hand, you can include parks which lets you explore it in different ways. When I say that, what I mean is there are different types of activities that they can be part of. It just doesn't have to be jeep safaris. So that is something you need to consider. You can offer in parks like Satpura, you can do canoe safaris, you can do walking safaris, you can do night drives, you can camp inside the forest. You have 2 night, 3 day programs when you can hike right through the tiger reserve. So that's a far more enriching wilderness experience than just, Bandhavgarh, Kana, Pench, and you're doing just back-to-back jeep safaris. The idea is in the 3 parks, add one park which is not tiger centric, which is more about overall wilderness experience. I am quite sure that your guests will enjoy it and appreciate it more and will want to come back. I mean, we've had guests who want to travel for 10 days, 12 days to just Satpura. I mean, they love the park so much. And there are many examples. I know I'm using only Satpura over here, which is not fair. But there are many parks in India where you can do multiple activities. And the idea is a lot of times your partners and your guests are not aware about it. You need to educate yourself and you also need to educate your partners. It is your responsibility to do so. If you're getting into wildlife travel, you need to become a good teacher. You need to ensure that they understand the experience. You need to do expectation setting, and you also need to provide them with a logic behind why you're doing what you're doing. For example, I would recommend a canoe safari to photographers because it allows you to get close to very interesting species, uh, like crocodiles, to birds that are there on the river. It also gives you a very interesting perspective on mammals coming down to drink water because now you're below eye level. So these are activities which a photographer will definitely enjoy. A walking safari is a great way to begin a safari because you can then immediately convert your guests from becoming a spectator to a participant. You can teach them about the sounds, the smells of the forest. A lot of people for whom it is the first visit to India, they do not understand what different alarm calls mean in our forest. Somebody who's been to Africa does not know about any alarm calls that happen in India. Alarm call of a sambar deer, alarm call of a cheetal, alarm call of a barking deer, alarm call of a nilgai, alarm call of a chinkara or a chosinga, alarm call of even your jungle fowls and even something as common as a peacock. Everything gives an alarm call when there's a predator on the prowl. So you need to understand and teach them. It's when this kind of interaction takes place, it's always going to be a far more educational and a far more enriching experience for your guest. Now, a lot of people, what I'm saying, a lot of people who are already on this are doing it. I know, you know, uh, so this is largely for those who still don't understand how we can explore our forests. So please spend time in forests. Please do add to the itinerary places which can enhance your experience and offer something different. Now, another such park on a similar itinerary is Panna Tiger Reserve. There is a lot of culture that you can add. There are places like Ajaygarh Fort, Kalinjar Fort. You can get onto the river, do a rowboat safari, which is fantastic for birding. You can even go inside the park and do a motorboat safari. And quite often, our guests, have been rewarded with tigers in the water, especially in the summer months. And when you're in a boat, you often get much closer to animals because they're not disturbed or threatened by you, as much as when you are on foot or when you are in a jeep. So that is something definitely to consider. Also, you want to showcase not just the wildlife, but also about the entire ethos of the place. The people who inhabit that area, the culture, how it has been protected over history. There are little things which add value. Even going to the farm, even going to a potter over there. So you need time on hand to showcase all of this. Now, let's say in Satpura, you can do all these different types of safaris, but you're there for 2 nights. There's just not enough time to offer any of these safaris. So you'll always be indecisive. Just give 2 jeep safaris and get done with it. And also, people want to learn about new things. People want to understand. You need, And it is also your responsibility to sensitize people about the environment. You need them to understand how these little things like flies, frogs, everything impacts them. Once they understand how it impacts their life, then only they are going to give it two thoughts about conserving it. And it is our responsibility as somebody who makes money off wildlife to also give back to it. And how we can give back is conservation, protection, and things like that. And for that, you need to educate people. Educational element needs to be part of the itinerary. Also, I spoke about offering traveling naturalists. How many of us actually actively, in a quotation, would give a supplement for a traveling naturalist? There are not too many of us, and I'm again talking about general travel trade, and it's not about people who regularly organize wildlife travel. So why is the naturalist important? They are the storytellers. They travel with you, and that's why I'm saying these traveling naturalists quite often can talk on all subjects, be it politics, be it about agriculture, be it because when you're driving from park to park, you're going through areas where the guest is likely to see tribal people. They are likely to see farmlands. They might have questions about the kind of schooling facilities that are there. And also, of course, that goes without saying that these naturalists are going to be interpreting the forest for you, because without whom some people just except for the big, larger, iconic species, you will miss out most of the things. So that is something to keep in mind. And quite often these naturalists become great friends with your guests, and they will always enhance the program. Don't always worry about losing your business. Somebody might take your business, or this naturalist might. How many of your guests will he break away? You need to understand that we need to have larger faith in people, in how we partner and showcase. Sometimes we just don't have all the elements to put together a wildlife trip. We should be, we should not be scared to pass on information, because at the end of the day, your partners will value you for that. And that is something I strongly believe. Maybe I'm it's just my perspective. But quite often in the forest, it is undeniable that most of the forest department guides will not get into the smaller, lesser fauna. They will just be focusing on tigers and lions and bears and things like that. And which is why you will miss out on a lot of small things which are amazing. And this is an example I give to everybody. You see the small things, this pan-throated lizard, you would completely miss. It's so well camouflaged. That's why you need naturalists. That's why you need walking safaris, so that these animals too can be appreciated for what they are. And a jungle is not complete with just a tiger. The tiger needs, in order for the tiger to exist, we need to showcase many of these species, and we need to also protect these species. And if you are not aware of these species, then how will you ever protect them? You will not know what is lost till it's lost. Moving on. Julian, please let me know if I'm overshooting my time. I'll just go a little faster. I tend to ramble on. Now, another major element is how we do lodge selections.
Varun, just I don't know how much longer you've got. What do you think? You've got another 5 minutes or so?
Yeah. Okay. I'll just pick up the pace.
No, you're doing it's fantastic. Really enjoying it. But if you could, we've been going well. Okay, thanks.
Good. So in terms of lodge selection, we need to be more conscious about how we are selecting our lodge, what we need to recommend, and some key things that I personally feel we should follow, and it's in no order, it's just as it is. Of course, a key point is going to be the price point, because every guest is different. They have different budgets. So you need to identify, what fits best. But at the same time, you need to ask yourself various questions, because, these are things that are of value to me. I like to promote properties that are owner driven and managed over those that are not, because usually owners are passionate about wildlife, and they're far more engaged. So your guest is talking to somebody who's more passionate. And it is also important to, learn about what are the values that are important to a lodge. What kind of local employment is there. I've already mentioned the reason why you need to have more local employment, because money needs to go back into the community for conservation purpose. Are you sustainable? Are you taking steps to eliminate plastic? How do you manage your waste? You know, are you recycling your gray water? Are you using renewable energies? Be it solar or wind energy. You know, has the lodge invested in a team of naturalists? It's not always the case. Quite often, everybody says, "Yes, we provide you with a naturalist," and they are just hiring local people as and when that happens. But uh, it is always a far better experience if the lodge has its own naturalist. They tend to bond as a team. They tend to work better as a team. They tend to develop new experiences as a team. You know, and what kind of land area is the lodge constructed over? Is it kept wild? Is it all manicured? What kind of construction they have opted with? And this will just, you need to be more responsible. What we are seeing, with global warming and other things, is that we need to find a way to be far more responsible, efficient, and sustainable. Uh, and of course, things like fencing become important, especially for wildlife. There are a lot of people who put fencing because they don't want wild animals coming in, because they want to, they're concerned about the guests' safety and security. And quite often, the animals don't want anything with your guests. I don't think I've heard of any animal coming in mauling a guest in there at the property or anywhere else in India. There's so many guests on walking safaris and other things in other part of the world that have even died because of these. So animals try and avoid you. Please understand that, but your fencing can become a threat to the animals. Uh, you know, just some of the questions out there. We will circulate the presentation around for your benefit. And of course, then sometimes you don't have the time or the energy to do it, and then you always have partners like Toft. And how they help you is they already have an audit for these lodges. They already have certification for lodges. They are already providing you and looking into which are the sustainable lodges, which are the more responsible lodges. So, and they're there conducting, seminars such as this to talk about, all the things that I've mentioned before. So it is important to find partners, because I understand we have limited time, but at the same time, we need to be aware about, all these elements about wildlife, about the lodges, about the experiences, and that's where partners like Toft come in. For those of you who don't have the time, well, the easier way of doing it is, then relying on somebody like Toft. But at the same time, I would encourage you to explore more. I'm just summarizing. I'm more or less through all the points that we've spoken about. That these are the various elements that will help you build a far more immersive and a far more enriching experience for your guests. Uh, I'm being very generic because it's an endless discussion. Uh, and India has amazing wildlife. I'm I don't have any tiger related pictures in this, but all these species, they will all draw your guests. Be it the red panda, the black bucks, the otters. Bird life is fantastic in India, and of course you have species like the lions, the gharials. There are 870 plus species that are endemic to India or are found only in India, and a lot of species are only found in certain areas. We need to learn about them. We need to talk about them. So yeah, that's it about, for me. In general, I'd say this is my approach to talking about uh, wildlife travel in India, and this is how I go about planning it. And the more I would encourage everybody, awareness and education is the biggest step that you can take. And I would encourage all the owners of companies to find an expert uh, for wildlife and just give it a dedicated space to grow. And I'm sure quite organically it'll grow. Yeah, that's it for me. If you have any questions, please feel free to fire away.
Thanks, Varun. I'm going to hand over to my colleague Rita to sort of bring it all together. But very, very good talk. Really, really excellent. I hope everyone really enjoyed it and completely agree with what Varun's doing in terms of operating. And Top Tigers is there very much to be a support structure to your decision making, and that's what he talked about. We do the hard work so that you can make those decisions, and that purchasing chain that you can operate as tour operators, as DMCs, is really critical to driving that key purchasing decisions, and asking those questions is really, really important of your providers, your lodge providers. And so I totally agree. And the one thing Varun probably didn't concentrate on because he's very much focused on the kind of guests and you and this and this. The reality is the destinations deserve longer periods of time from their clients. They can make a greater connection with people. They can get greater insight. They make more money off your clients. It's much more sustainable. Lots of these destinations in India, the one-night destinations, are highly unsustainable, and mostly because we're not giving them time. We're not giving clients time in there. They're not able to spend their money outside of what they've spent with their tour operators. So that time is critical to drive sustainability. The longer you stay in places, not only that clients have better experiences, but they're able to put more back into the economy and back into local people. So absolutely critical part of destination management, extending stays. And if I had any chance to do anything, I would actually stop the one-nighters in many of these places, because they are what drive a lot of the bad practices, a lot of the unsustainable elements of it. So hugely good, Varun. Really, really interesting. Thank you very much.